to take a racing series, say Formula 1 or Formula 2 or Formula 3, you would not change the rule set for a very long time. You would keep a certain rule set for like 10 to 20 years and then go ahead and change it as per your wish. Or you would stick it to the same format, or even switch it up or give some facelifts. Or in other words, if you're another touring car series, you would also ask for either TC2000 or TCR. Another different would be that if you would stick to a single set of regulations and keep that for eternity. Something that reminds me of Super GT. But in this world, anything can happen. Your costs can overrun. You can even lose a set of manufacturers for a certain championship, and you would be left red-faced with having a single make series and have that manufacturer dominate the entire sport. But you can't let that happen so easily in a series that catches eyeballs and attention. Or you would be having a multi-class racing series, but that would keep changing its mindset and class rule sets or the regulations only because there's a new set of regulations coming in. You would have to change. But all of these factors do not apply to one series. That one series is being held in Germany. That one series is also going to all other places that it should have never gone to. That one racing series is none other than DTM. It's a touring car series that is in Germany, but not anymore, because it's not a touring car series at all. It's just a standard GT3 series. But how did it get here? To start off with, DTM originally started as DRM, also known as Deutsche Tourenwagen Meisterschaft. It started out as a Group 2 and a Group 4 GTC racing series for the cars, like the ones you see for the BMW 2000 and Ferrari 5112 LM. It started in 1972, and then eventually in 1977, they were made to add Group 5 series. Those cars were absolute fire breathers on the track. No traction control, unlimited pure raw power. Yeah, there's BMW M1s, the Porsche 935s. Well, only that, because I don't think Ferrari could have come there. So all this series was going well. You had the likes of Hans Heyer, Klaus Ludwig, and Hans-Joachim Stuck. I'm sorry if I don't get his name right. You had these kind of drivers, and you also coined as the term where real men raced in the DRM. Because the DRM involves hands of steel if you want to control these cars highly, and they were very powerful in that. But all of this also had to come to a roadblock, because in 1982, the Germans decided to do this. Let's get those Group C boys and make it a multi-class series. That would sound better, would it? Well, and actually, it would have to do more harm than good, because only the Porsches were the champions of the series. The only two drivers that are very notable to have won that is Stefan Beloff and, of course, Jochen Mass. Those two actually won the series in the final 2 years, being 1984 and 1985. Because in 1985, the series would altogether be dissolved. For real. Because the Group C prototypes were getting faster, and the Group 5, well, if you would ask me, were just getting obsolete. Yep. That M1 was about to get obsolete, but the M1 never raced. In the end, the M1 actually got its own series. So Group 5 came to an abrupt end, and nothing cannot be done about that. So the only logical solution was to move to a touring car style series. And that is where the real DTM story starts. This DTM actually started in 1984. as Deutsche Produktionswagen Meisterschaft. Yep, it started in 1984 with which rule set? Group A. Yep, Group A touring cars, BMW M3s, then of course the Volvos, and the GTR never made it to the Germans because the GTR was nowhere about to be going there. So the usual guys returned, and of course with Klaus Ludwig and Hans-Joachim Stuck, they all returned back to the series. Also in the fray was Ford Sierra. I never knew Ford Sierra would come to the German side, but that Ford Sierra was about to be replaced. So from 1984 all the way till 1990, the series was somewhat doing real good. I was actually doing good because that was the original DTM. And they also banned turbochargers in 1990, thanks to cost. And the 1990s to 1992 was somewhat of a real good battle in DTM. Why? Because Audi came. Audi, Mercedes, Opel, and of course, a certain Ford Mustang came to the fight. And in 1990 to 1992 was a real good year. Real good years. Why? Hans-Joachim Stuck, Frank Bieler, and of course Klaus Ludwig. 2 Audi championships and 1 Mercedes. So that was really good because you had actual relatable Group A cars fighting out for a series. Am I right? You would be right, but you would have a different opinion, which I don't matter. So all this Group A racing was doing well until it was 1993, where DTM had another rule change. Out went Group A and in came Class 1 touring cars. And let me tell you, these things were the absolute Formula 1 of touring cars. You had absolutely immense horsepower and technology within them. Audi had quit the series just before it could even start, though it had an unproduced prototype. BMW too quit, and they too had an unraced prototype as well. So who was left? Mercedes, Opel, and of course a new entrant, Alfa Romeo. And these Class 1 rule cars were literally, as I earlier said, Formula 1 of touring cars. You wanted 4-wheel drive? Go ahead and add. Advanced electronics? Why not? Active suspension? Oh yes. Aerodynamics? Go ahead and add them already. Limited slip differential? Well, would they care? Well, it's just added. Would anyone care? And this was becoming a technological arms race. By 1993, Opel had already developed an active suspension because they were actually helping the Williams Formula 1 team in doing so. And this was about to get even worse. Hold on till your moment. The 1993 season was actually doing well. And, to be honest, some of the older cars that started had come on the race as well. The races took place at usual places, being Hockenheim, Nurburgring, Diepholz airfield, Avus, Alenmannenring, and good old Hockenheim. The only 2 international rounds were Zolder and of course, Zolder was the only international round because Donington Park wasn't even a non-championship round at all. The championship actually went well for 1993 and 1994, but all of it would come down in 1995, where the DTM series would be rebranded to International Touring Cars. And this was a real big problem, because the races went to places that DTM never even went at all. Helsinki Thunder, Estoril, Magny Course, you would name those circuits. And let me tell you, they had the worst ever attendance figures. And no one would even turn up for these races like anything. And the Class 1 cars were getting very, very expensive. And Opel was almost at the cusp of losing a championship when they were happy to win the last championship of the last DTM they would ever drive. All of this would come to an end, and DTM was done for good for 1995. There was nothing more planned after that. The series would be silent for the next 5 years, until the dawn of the new millennium, where DTM was officially back for good. And this time, they decided they would only stick to German rounds. But that's fine. As for the regulation changes, well, this time they decided to do one thing. Take a two-door coupe car, put in a monoblock V8, give it light aerodynamics, and that's it. You would race them around. So the series actually started in 2000, and for the first 3 years it was kind of good, because it would be a cost control series. Audi, Opel and Mercedes were the only manufacturers, although Audi didn't even do any participation. They actually had their ABT workshop, so they actually did it. So Audi wasn't in the factory effort at all. But in 2004, Audi returned. And this time they actually made real racing cars. And in 2004, they experienced immediate success. Matthias Ekström won the first series championship. And eventually, that same year, Opel decided to pull out at the end of the 2005 season. Just only 5 seasons of their racing. That was supposed to be filled by MG Rover, but they didn't enter because the April they collapsed entirely. So Audi and Mercedes each fielded winning 10 cars, and at the end, the series went more of V8 Supercars Australia. When it was down under, you would have Holden Sport. Here you had 4 rings and a TriStar. But all of this would come to an abrupt halt in 2013 because BMW would return, and they would do a different kind of rule set. Because they would continue to keep the monoblock V8 and eventually settle on high aerodynamics, that give loads of downforce, and introduce Formula 1 style DRS. Yeah, the DRS. DRS gave events overtakes and even got pushed to pass at that time. So the series is doing well. Audi, Mercedes and BMW were racing in harmony until DTM decided to bring in success ballast, meaning that the fastest car had the heaviest weight and the lightest car, loser car had the lowest weight. Eventually, the downfall was about to begin when Mercedes decided, we've done enough, we're quitting for good. Yes, Mercedes quit the series in 2018 because they were doing so well in Formula 1 and Formula E was their next target. What was even bigger was in 2019, Super GT and DTM decided, let's merge both the rule sets. So instead, 2019, they started to use turbocharged 4-cylinder engines, eventually copying the specifications of the Super GT. Aston Martin came as a replacement, but they don't even need to be mentioned about because they didn't even do well at all. Super GT as DTM was another thing to be talked. It was there that only the German racers were qualified, and where Germans had won the most in GTM and at Super GT racing. Eventually, the Japanese makers won the other Super GT vs DTM Dream Race. All in all, Aston Martin quit the series because they couldn't perform well. And it was also the perfect time for the COVID pandemic to strike right at the heart of where all motorsport was happening. The DTM had a truncated calendar in 2020, and the only car that were fielded was that of Audis and BMWs. Audi and BMW had their only Class 1 cars, and guess what? Their battle lasted only just 12 months. Or should I say 6 months? Yeah, 6 months, because by this time, Audi were having very good success, especially in that of Formula E, and were also planning a Dakar program. But all they decided was, we will quit DTM for good. We've had our rivalries, we're done for everything else. This left ITR, the real organizers of DTM, red-faced, because they cannot have a single manufacturer series. BMW already had an M4 Class 1 DTM car ready for next year, but that car you can drive it in R-Factor 2, only if you had the purchase to buy. And DTM were left red-faced, whether they change another class regulation for the series or stick with these, or should they halt the series for a while. They had the following options: change to a GT Endurance or GTLM series, change it to TCR series, change it to GT3, keep the existing class rules set and make BMW the sole maker of that racing series. Or the other option was to get GT3. Don't get me wrong, GT3 was also popular at the time and was cropping up in a few endurance series. Although the FIA decided to put the GT3 only after a few seasons of the hypercar usage. And GTE was long dying, which we'll see in another video. TCR was, well, in its worst water state, because TCR was having its own issues on the other hand, for which we'll discuss another video like it again. So what did ITR actually do to meet the consensus of the racing series? Well, they said this to the Japanese Auto Federation: we're not having enough manufacturers, so sorry, we had to quit our collaboration. And they eventually quit the Super GT and DTM collaboration, which only just lasted for 2019, and that was the end of it. So in the end, what was the consensus of the ITR and DTM? Well, the answer is very obvious. Hello GT3. DTM became the GT3 de facto series, or became the Shadow series. The only thing, it was renamed GT Plus. Right, just only for the naming issues. So the DTM had started to use GT3 series. It also brought in some hype. Alex Albon and Van der Linde brothers. The two of them had brought hype to the GTM series. Eventually, GT3 cars became de facto. There was also a courtroom dispute with ADAC and ITR, because ADAC were running a parallel GT3 series and were left red-faced as to why DTM was having such a series. That courtroom boiled down to one thing: DTM was now the new de facto GT3 series, and ADAC were left red-faced as to what to do. Eventually, ADAC continued their own GT3 series and left DTM for good. It was at this time that Porsche, McLaren, Lamborghini all came to the fold. And right now as we speak, even Ford entered the series. And so it does continue the story, the current one being GT3 to rule for DTM. If I were you, I should have just kept the series for 2 to 3 years, and then switched to a brand new rule set, completely rewriting all the cars, and possibly reduce the cost for good. So that was the end of DTM in 2020, with now DTM being a de facto GT3 series, like all other GT3 series present. Yeah, no mention to Fanatec's GT World Challenge because that's not even a World Championship. So that ultimately brings up to the video, as I already concluded earlier, which I don't want to repeat again. What would your thoughts, and what would you do if you were DTM's commissioner? Would you have waited a year or two to actually change up the series? Would you do anything else to save DTM? Or would you stick to a brand new rule set for all the right reasons? Put your comments in the video below. I'd definitely like to see some response. And of course, in the meanwhile, keep racing, clean, safe, and of course, responsibly. Till then, see you for now. Goodbye.